So what about the type of evolution you see of the market in terms of dimensions and numbers? There are great differences. There are small structures in some regions, and whenever the due diligence has to carry out at a distance, you have to see whether you need a national service or I think that the market is going towards concentration. It is a very complex market. The need for the banks is to have a structured interlocutor to be able to manage information, to guarantee certain levels of security and compliance. The market is difficult. This is why there is going to be a concentration. A question. So you're following your policy based on acquisitions, mainly in the unsecured world. In other countries, you're going strong in the secured sector. Do you think you may proceed towards other asset classes in Italy? Yes, because if we take a look at the features of the bank portfolios, in Italy there is an important component of secured and SME. SME portfolio basically with a part that is secured and another part of secured residential. If you wanted to grow in this market, you have to be structured in this sector too. So my answer is yes, we are open to other asset classes. I appreciate your frankness because the other speakers did not reply so much. Now, Francesca Carafa from Checkstat, she knows this universe very well. How many companies? 1,700 companies which have to deal with margins that are under strong pressure. How many of them will survive? I think in these 30 years in the consumer world, and then I must say that there has been a great change in the past few years. The banking market no longer used these structures, and then with the use of the 115 into the banking market, things have changed. There is this large volumes of credits that have to be serviced, and you need to find the services. So there are potential services among the 115 companies, but these companies are in the consumer commercial multi-utility market, whereas servicing the NPLs is a little bit different. This concentration, these acquisitions that are carried out are important because the market have different asset requirements, but the challenge is going to concern the servicing capacity. I think that there is going to be a strong concentration over the next few years. Mr. Balzotto, you are also protagonist of important transaction. So investors aim at the platform and not just at investments. I think that an international investment who wants to become a leading player in a country has to have their own platform. With the level of returns that we see linked to the prices, the servicing capacity is going to be fundamental. There is going to be a need for greater professionalism, to have larger companies. If it is a captive company, the margins are not the primary objective. Returns have to be there for the shareholders too. Just out of curiosity, your geographical position from the point of view of the development of the platform, maintaining your resources and reducing the resources turnover, is it an advantage for you? Well, having an international investor in a secondary market is a reason for keeping the resources there. In Milan, it would have been different. There would have been a greater turnover, but since we want to enlarge, extend the platform, we have to make some efforts to attract talents. But if the platform is already well developed, a secondary location is not a problem. It can be a plus. And then there is a question about the capacity of master services. There are very few in Italy. There are not few at all. There are too many of them, I think. Even in master servicing, there is some kind of evolution. I don't want to make any names, but there are some services who have applied for authorization to the Bank of Italy to become 106 and carry out just master servicing. There are 3 or 4 of us now, but I think that over the next few years the market will open up. There are financial mediators that usually deal with lending, and they're going to act as master servicers of themselves. There's going to be some additional competition, therefore, over the next few years, although this is a very, very regulated sector. It is not a banal activity. It is very much formalized with great responsibility towards the investors and the regulators. The market will be extended, but I don't see any more operators at the moment.
A potential like senior lending could be plugged into a master servicing activity for a player like you?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think that when I look at the transactions in the Italian market, I think we all need to appreciate that the amount of capital the market needs to sell the amount of assets that need to leave the banking system is a very large number, and we'll all have innovative strategies for that. So obviously, some people have deposit licenses and have found smart ways of optimizing the capital structure to buy like that. Obviously, the new law that allows the Section 106 companies to act as the sponsoring vehicle to facilitate a larger regulatory transaction is interesting to us. And as a publicly rated source of capital, I think the one thing we will clearly do is not compete with our own clients. So I think we like the idea better of supporting a master servicer to help a client do a transaction where we're part of the capital structure, but we're not a bidder against one of the other consortiums in our own clients. So yeah, I think I would expect us over time to play that role, whether it's a senior lender or some other part of the securitization law, as sponsor or as issuer. I mean, there's the different nuances we would have to work our way through, but we've certainly started to look at that.
The Voice. C'è una domanda per te. Vediamo se fai lo spiritoso anche con la risposta.
There is a question also for you, The Voice. But do you do the servicing in terms of outsourcing? If you do this business, well, I don't know why you consider The Voice as a member of the Ifis Bank. Well, secondly, our bank, Banca Ifis, believes that they want to keep for themselves their skills. They want to buy and manage their own portfolios with such a mass of products that allows you to have an inner platform with distinctive capacities and distinctive abilities and distinctive skills. Pagano, how do you see what banks do internally? What about their ability to manage the situation? I don't think you can say anything general about all of the banks, because some banks have highly organized structures. They're investing, and they have been investing for a long time. So now they tend to outsource management just for some asset classes. The things get more complicated when you stick to inner management, but you don't invest enough. So the situation is different depending on the situation in each individual bank. If you don't take investment decisions because you can't do that, so you don't invest in men, in people and technology, then that is different. Yes, huge progress has been made on the part of the banking system. Credit management is not related to balance sheet strategies. Jextra, what about your characteristics? I think one of your characteristics is also an ethical management of collection. What do you mean by that? Well, credit collection is an activity which has a social significance. On a daily basis, we are confronted with people that are not in their possible best conditions. So today, the social messages that are being sent out tell us that we should move towards transparency. Transparency was mentioned here too earlier on. It's the same sort of problem, really. We should have transparent relationships with our debtors. We invested on that quite a lot in the past few years, and we got international certification on that, because if you get international certification on that, it means you can make yourself available to external certificators or certifiers that may come into your bank and see whether what you tell the public is true or not. So we tend to uphold that sort of values. Well, there is a forum with codes that have been renewed in the past few years. It's an issue. Just 1 minute for a takeaway message concerning the evolution of this market and what will be the crucial element in the relationship between investors, servicers, and the market. I wanted to talk about some possible evolutions. First of all, the monitoring agent that has been introduced for GACs. We have introduced that in the Ipercarriage operation and in Creva, the first GACs that were done in Italy. We introduced that in our banks because we noticed there is a gap between the language used by foreign investors. We had two new investors that entered Italy only very recently, and the management on the part of the servicer that has gone on going about services as usual. So this is the first point that I would like to make with regard to the evolution of that market. And then we think that the figure of master servicers will evolve also in the future, considering the changes that have been introduced in the legislation. The companies that are vehicles for securitizations have been given more flexibility now, and so they may refund debtors, they may buy stock, they may acquire a holding. And then we have the so-called Reocco in Italy, companies that are created to manage real estate assets. The two figures have been made to overlap, and now all of the flows managed through real estate by Reocco can go to the exclusive benefits of investors. And these are the three main elements that we see emerge in the next few months. A recent tool, but it might be very important, therefore. Well, mainly, I think there will be a consolidation of servicer markets. New international players will get into the market. They are not there at the moment. They will do pure servicing activities, and the ability of delivery will become even more important. What about Antonella Pagano? I think that the leverage activity on the part of the banks will continue. It will increase, or then outsourcing in a reasonable manner, finding the right partner will also be important. And we are starting to see carve-out operations for banking platforms. It's something that happened quite a lot abroad. So essentially there is a bank that gives its internal collection structure. It entrusts contracts for the management stock inside. Well, it's something that is starting to happen. For Carige, for example, yes, it's starting to happen, but we're lagging behind vis-à-vis other European countries, and also in Spain, for example. That is the main example. We are lagging behind in Italy in that respect, and that is one of the possible evolutions that might help both. It would help both banks and investors. I think there will be a positive in development for services and servicing in Italy. It will necessarily be positive. I think there will be a concentration within the 111, and I hope that at the legislative level, the 115 will be revisited. By managing these masses of credits. One needs to regulate them better with specific assets underpinning that activity. Zachary, your takeaway message?
Italian market, there's an opportunity to get big and there's an opportunity to get strong. I think almost all of us will get big. I mean, the size of the market makes that very likely. By strong, I mean getting good at very specific things. And I think it's going to be very hard to get strong. It's a complicated market, complicated assets, and very diverse country. And I think trying to be a market leader in specific activities that banks and investors want to use us for is the challenge. And so I think we'll all get big in the short term, but in 5 years' time, what's the right thing to be strong at, the right model, and who can be strong in the right things will be an interesting challenge.
Allora, io ringrazio tutti i protagonisti che sono stati sul palco a parlare del futuro.
So I would like to thank all of the participants that were on stage to talk about the future. There will be a lot of things to say, to be told also in the future. Thank you very much for your precious contribution.